On behalf of the International Insurance Society, I'd like to welcome everyone to our discussion today that will focus upon the promise and importance of India as a diverse and resilient market and as a factor in the global economy. My name is Ralph Muserino, and I'm joined by a couple of colleagues today to participate in this discussion. Vishakha RM is the CEO and Managing Director of India First Life Insurance Company. Under her leadership, the company has grown significantly over recent years, and she is a leader in the insurance industry in India. Also joining us today is Gary Comerford, who is the President and CEO of CMC Global, a consulting company focused on international experience. Gary has over 40 years experience in global financial services, including about a 10-year period of time in which he worked in India, including a role as GM of Sun Life. I will introduce several discussion points and ask each of my colleagues to begin the discussion. The other participants will join in and add their thoughts as appropriate. But let me set the stage for today's discussion. India, known for its rich history, diverse culture, and vast population, has emerged as a major global player in recent years. Its booming economy has experienced consistent and significant growth, making India an economic powerhouse, attractive to global investment and the creation of partnerships with other countries. It's now the sixth largest economy in the world and projected to be the third largest by 2030, with a current population of over 1.4 billion people. Many factors combine to make India a market of opportunity in multiple sectors, including finance and insurance. These factors include a large consumer market with an expanding middle class and rising disposable income, an abundant and skilled labor force, a thriving IT sector, a sense of vibrant entrepreneurship and a startup ecosystem, which make India a very formidable player on the international scene. So let's start by talking about the significance of India as an enormous market and its emergence as a major global economy. Gary, would you please begin that discussion?
Well, thanks, Ralph. Ralph, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me here today to talk about kind of my second native land. I've had the privilege of spending a great deal of time in India over the last, well, it appears almost 25 years now. And it's very interesting that India today, and particularly with Modi's visit recently to the United States and other visits that he's made around the world, has become very topical. And people, in some respects, you kind of say, people are just discovering India. Well, the reality is, India has been on a trajectory that has been equal to, in many ways, China for the past 25 years. There's a difference in that trajectory in the sense that, in many respects, that China just caught on very, very quickly and was almost like a hockey stick. But with that, some of the expectations that people had for the market just didn't get realized, and the ability to do business the way you would like. I would liken India to have been somewhat slower, more gradual in adopting to more of a kind of an economic formula that suits them. And believe it or not, that all started in the early 90s, 1992 with the Malhotra Commission, and kind of a very much a revision and a look at what should India do going forward from an economic perspective. And there were significant changes, whether it was in the stock market, the creation of the IRDA, the Insurance Regulatory Development Authority, and other things that signaled that India was about to change. Now, you have to understand that India is a democracy. And if you look at the number of political parties involved in India in any given day, particularly during that period of time, I think at one point in time, it took 18 different parties to form a coalition. So you can imagine it was a bit like herding cats. But through all that, there was a determination. And I'm just going to end with this. And then you say, all right, so India had that gradual. Where are they today? Well, they are right now a formidable competitor for China. Now, you can argue the size of the market and everything. China is absolutely dominant. There's no question about that. But when you look at potential, and which I quite honestly, saw 25 years ago, it's enormous. Why? Why do international companies want to do business in India today? And why did people want to do it 25 years ago? The basic core elements are still there. The number one is, by and large, if you're doing business in India, it's in English speaking. And you said, well, gee, that's interesting. I remember when I was negotiating all the contracts with the Aditya Birla Group, we negotiated all the contracts in English. And I was able to do that. That was a significant advantage. British common law as a basis, all right? People can say that it's very slow in exercising its due diligence, but it's there, and you have a base for able to do. Probably the number one thing that was in India that was just unbelievable, if you walk the streets of Mumbai or Delhi, is the entrepreneurial spirit. India is a nation of entrepreneurs. 1 in 10 individuals work for themselves. I mean, there's shops everywhere. Now that's migrating and that's changing, but that spirit is there of creating businesses. So I can go on and on and on, including the demographics. When you got the average age of an Indian at 29 years of age, there's an old saying, and that is that China, given its population, is going to grow old before it grows rich. India will grow rich before it grows old. And that is a significance, particularly in a market such as insurance, as the business that we deal in. It's family formulation stages, and as they acquire assets that need to be insured. And that's where India is today. So I'll just leave it at that this all of a sudden discovery of India, that it's the next best thing. Quite honestly, it's been a blinding glimpse of the obvious for those observers that were willing to pay attention for over a decade. And with Modi's arrival in 2014 and the significant reforms that he has been able to do, having a majority government, has really, really paved the way for the potential that India and many people are seeing today, Ralph.
Thank you for that, Gary. Vishaka, would you have anything to add to Gary's comments from your perspective as a leader in the industry right now?
Thanks, Ralph. Thanks, Gary. Made me feel very proud of the country indeed. And I think if I have to articulate the change in philosophy as we experience it living in the country, is Modi's government is actually enabling people. So, the old Chinese proverb, teach a man how to fish, don't give him a fish if you want him to prosper in the long term. So the government actually has been teaching people how to fish and helping them get the equipment necessary to fish. So when you look at statistics, in the beginning, you will find, subsidies have been cut. There are no more freebies. Like even the Pradhan Mantri Jeevan Jyoti Bima Yojana, which was a very unique, one of its sort life insurance plan that was launched for 330 rupees. So what does that make it in terms of a dollar of 80? About $4 for 200,000 rupees. And that cover was a subsidized rate and not a subsidized insurance. The whole difference in approach in terms of making people more self-sustaining, more independent. So the whole philosophy was teach a man how to fish, don't give him a fish. And I think that's what you see playing out in the country, everywhere.
Well, that's in sync with the entrepreneurial spirit of the country itself. When you think about people looking to earn their way and not look for freebies, as you say. I guess I'd like to throw out a question as a corollary to this discussion. And when you look at the market is enormous as a single market domestically. How do you see Indian industrial companies like the Tata Group, for example, that has a global footprint? How do you see the Indian companies reaching out and expanding globally?
Vishaka, why don't I take that first? Kind of having dealt with, I had the privilege in 1999, doing a joint venture with Kumar Birla of the Aditya Birla Group. And the Aditya Birla Group is, as you just described, Ralph, very much an international company. And there was the perception, you know, if I go back to the mid-90s, that the license Raj was kind of a term that was used. And that was that there was a select number of companies that were given licenses to do things, whether it was manufacturing fabrics and everything, and, you know, whatever, but there was cement or whatever it happened to be. And what that was, that stagnated, you know, competition. But it allowed industries to survive in India under the regime that was existing. Once those shackles were removed, all right, the question was, will the Tatas, will the Birlas, will the Ambanis, you know, will they survive? All right. And the reality is they've thrived. They have just thrived. If you look at the Tata Group, which was known for, you know, building, you know, cars and trucks and a whole bunch of other things. The world's largest IT consulting company today is TCS Consulting, Tata Consulting. All right. How did that happen? It happened because of policies that were put in place on an education decades ago, and the IITs, the international schools that you know, for the technology, that became as good as anywhere in the world, where people would apply to an IIT rather than MIT. All right, and people say, "Oh no, that wouldn't happen." Yes, that happened. So there was a core. Was it big enough? No. When you have 1.4 billion people, and when I arrived in India, there was 800 million impoverished people. That number is now, Vishaka today, to probably more of a 250 million, 300 million, which is still unacceptable, but there has been such a rapid change in that. So what about these major companies? How have they done? Well, again, I look at the organization I'm most familiar with, the Birla Group, completely international. I look at the holding that goes. People would not know that one of the subsidiaries of the Aditya Birla Group is the world's largest producer of rolled aluminum. So in the United States, you know, Ralph, if you pick up a Coke or a Bud Light, or you want to buy a Ford F-150, that's Novelis, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Indelco, which is controlled by the Aditya Birla Group in India. And there's webs of that all through the economy people really do not pay attention to. So what I'm saying is that where they had a privilege, probably in the early 90s through licensed Raj, they have matured now into the point where they're as competitive as any company on the planet. And when you get into negotiations with an Indian firm, you better know your sums, because at the end of the day, they know how to do a deal and they're willing to do it. And Ralph, I may just tell you a story, because sometimes examples are. People say, well, it's so hard to do business in India. Well, it's not easy. I mean, absolutely. But can it be done? Absolutely. Go find a good partner. You say, well, I don't usually get partners. Well, in India, if you want to succeed, I would say that having a partner is of critical importance. And then to get that deal, it takes a lot of negotiations. But once you get the deal, all of a sudden, the world changes. An example, I remember we were, and I won't get into the mechanics of it, but I've been negotiating with a gentleman from the Birlas, and we negotiated for 2 years. We finally did the deal. A couple of days after we signed the contract, he said, Gary, would you like to save $1 million? I go, yes, I would. And then he goes, well, here, this is how you do it. And it had to do with some the way we were going to cash in some stocks that we were acquiring a company. It had never been done before. And I said, well, that's never been done. He says, yeah, I know. But he says, the rules have changed and we can do it. And I said, why didn't you tell me yesterday? And he says, you weren't my partner yesterday. And I would say that in the 25 years the joint venture has been together, that has been the attitude all day long. Now, of course, I'm retired, but I'm still associated with the Birla Group. That is an attitude that now you became their partner. And that is critical. And I think Vishaka could talk about the relationship with the parent and everything else that has to take place. And that is a core lesson, certainly that I learned, kind of in India. but it's there. So that maturing of the whole manufacturing, financial services sector is continuing to evolve, and it's on a lightning course of getting even stronger.
Well, Gary, I had firsthand experience with the Tata Group when AIG and Tata formed the partnership. And it was very clear to me that without that partnership at that point in time, we didn't have a prayer of being successful in India because of what the partner, particularly a partner like Tata, brings. And I've seen that partnership relationship work in other places like Israel, for example. AIG went into Israel 20 years ago, but without that local partner, we would have been nowhere. We would have been wasting our money. So I think the point you make about partnerships and the strength of the Indian companies that have emerged over the past 30 years is an excellent one. Vijaka, any comments on partnerships, et cetera?
Yeah, I think on the relationships, Indians are known to be extremely emotional, right? I mean, I think it's world over. You'll see it in our movies. You see it in your experiences with us. I don't think we know what a stiff upper lip means. You'll probably get this, emotions packed to its core. And if you can overcome that, if you can look into the reasons for those emotions and trust your gut on the emotions and then work with people. I think it's exactly what Gary said. If you're a partner and if you and I have sworn to working together, then we both have each other's back. That's the general principle. I think one of the things that in India, which I believe also exists in some of the South Asian markets, not that I have worked there, is a lot of respect to hierarchy and seniority. So there is an automatic respect that comes in towards hierarchy, towards seniority, and therefore the command or the chain of command of control is very clearly established. And that really helps in getting things done. The argumentative engine is very true, and we can be very argumentative people, but once a decision is made, because of that chain of command and that respect for hierarchy, the implementation is almost always guaranteed. There's no slack off there. So I think it's an ability to understand the complexity, and on one hand, you have highly emotional people who will be willing to fight and scream and shout and raise a decibel or two. And then you have on the other side, this complete respect for hierarchy, complete chain of command, a respect for the chain of command. So it can seem like a lot of contradictions, but if you're willing to immerse yourself in it, you will see how all of these contradictions actually play out so beautifully, and you can tango very well together. So I think, I don't know if I just made it sound even more complex than what it is, but I think working in India, it really gives you a deep understanding on human relationships. And if you're prepared for that, then I think it's fantastic. But if you're expecting a stiff upper lip, if you're expecting, either an American way or a British way, if you're expecting people to be very professional, so-called, it might just be more difficult.
I think one of the points that you learn as you deal more in an international environment, I know certainly when I came into the international business in AIG, I knew nothing about anything other than the United States and Canada. And you realize that local culture and local nuance is so important to building a successful business. Aside from the partnership, it is understanding what that market, what the people are like, what the needs are, and that one size doesn't fit all. And that you have to be able to react to the needs of the market. So excellent point. So let's move on to another topic of discussion. And we touched upon the startup ecosystem that exists in India, the entrepreneurial spirit. And when you think about a market as large as the Indian market, 1.4 billion people, and an emerging middle class, companies can't continue to do business the way they used to do business in order to distribute products, service customers, and create products that are needed by those customers. So, Vishaka, could you help us discuss a focus on innovation, technology development in the insurance sector, and some of the important initiatives that the government has entered into to drive participation in financial services and insurance?
Happy to. Thank you for that, Ralph. When I just look at India and I look at the diaspora that we have, one of the aspects that you need to recognize is that there is actually a very large market across the country for various different products. While we are right now, if you see that, we are the 5th largest market for Apple iPhones, okay, which is supposed to be pegged at the very highest segment of the customer. And while that is true, we are also perhaps the only country where you still have a 10 pence shampoo sachet, which still sells in the country. So you need to have models and very clearly divided, whether you're looking at a market which has got a small ticket size, small revenue, so large volumes, is that your model? Or you're looking at a high ticket size, a small revenue, but it's a value-based kind of a scheme. Insurance, typically, because it is a push product, tended to be more towards the higher ticket sizes or the medium-sized ticket sizes and not the micro as much, because the cost of distribution, the cost of premium collection, the cost of servicing was just too difficult, considering that it continues to be a push product. I think if I have to, well, there were many initiatives. If I have to call out 3 things that really has changed the entire way the financial services sector works. One is the demonetization. I think when the demonetization happened, considering that the UPI, the United Payment Interface, the UPI was already existing, the shift to digital money, whether it was PhonePe, Google Pay, and we have so many of them now, and all of them working on the UPI, I'm given to understand that India's UPI is now being replicated by the world because we were the first to have that payment interface, which is common platform across all the providers. So no provider had to create his or their own interface. So this was a common interface that was provided. So it got tested during the demonetization, and then you had COVID coming in, and that's when you saw the market really boom. Today, I don't even know if you can get up an image of, a fruit seller on a cart in the market. I wish someone could get that image out. And you'll see a fruit seller who's having a cart carrying a barcode, which you can actually scan and pay your money through GPay. Today, if I go out to buy just 2 oranges, I'll probably pay the 20 rupees through a GPay. Nobody carries cash anymore. And now we're evolving to a different system where you can actually have wallet. So you can put money into your wallet, and it's a digital wallet. And the kind of advancements that we've made in terms of the transfer of money, I think is been the first step in ensuring that we're now able to do a lot of micro insurance. So these are the 2 events. The 3rd event is where the Pradhan Mantri, the Prime Minister schemes were introduced. All these Prime Minister schemes that got introduced for a simple term life, for a simple personal accident, then the Ayushman Bharat, which was for a medical reimbursement policies, and an annuity, the Atal pension, which was a pension scheme. These are all the government schemes. What did the government do? They only set it up. They set it up so that people can then subscribe and get the benefit for it. The transfer of payment has been made easy. The dispatch of policies is made easy because it's now electronic. The schemes that have got rolled out are really small value schemes. But a combination of all of this is where you are seeing a lot of boom happening at an environment level. Now, based on this environment level, how are insurance companies integrating it together into their own products and their own innovation is where the difference comes in. So when you look at innovation in product, there are multiple ways of defining innovation. If you look at it as a hardcore product, I mean, you really can't innovate a term life cover. It is simple that, a person is worth so much and the person dies, you pay that much to the family and to survivors. So the innovation is not in the concept, but the innovation is really in the distribution, the way it is structured, how close can it be to the customer. And I think those are things that we're seeing, which is a dramatic shift thanks to technology. If you look at the number of customers who use a smartphone in India, it's mind-boggling. And I think that's what is important to see. Not sure if I answered your question, Ralph, but I'm going to take a breather here.
Well, yeah, I think you gave us excellent insight into it. I guess to follow up, when you think about innovation, in the past, I think innovation was pretty much focused on bringing products to market. Now it seems companies around the world, not just in India, are focusing on how to distribute products electronically using the mobile devices to support those products. We recently had Lemonade announced that it settled an auto claim, I believe, in 2 seconds. So there's this abundance now of innovation coming at a service and distribution level. So I guess the question is are companies in the position now to be as innovative with product as opposed to being just innovative with distribution and process?
I think there's a lot of sandbox approach that's come in, and people are trying to see how they can innovate on the sandbox approach. But I think there is, even if you see the world over, even if you look outside for inspiration, you definitely don't see anything outside for inspiration in a life insurance product innovation. You see a lot of it in the claims processes. You see a lot of it in the way it is distributed. But the product structure itself, I think, is continued to be held very tightly by the actuaries. And I think the actuaries are still being very conservative in how much you are willing to do in terms of innovation. But the innovation I see is in flexibility of premiums. The innovation I see is in challenging the actuarial computations in terms of having a level premium and a level payout. I think we're seeing more and more adjustment to the lifestyles and to see can a product evolve with the customer as the customer's journey evolves. I think those are the kind of innovation that you're seeing, which is more customer friendly. The product innovation itself, if you're looking at product as a par product, a non-par product, a unit-linked product, and a term product, you don't see innovation there. But if you're looking at adapting them based on customer profile, based on the process of sale, based on the payout structures, there I think you're seeing a lot of thought, a lot of customer insight, and a lot of adaptation to what customer requirements are.
Ralph, can I just maybe a comment on this? Just want to make the point, and I'm really building on what Vishakha is saying, but maybe more in a more general sense. Do not underestimate the investment that India has made in what I call infrastructure, and infrastructure in many different ways. Let's call infrastructure of technology for one. India has harnessed technology in a way that few other countries have done so quickly. Vishakha was talking about, the payment system is one, but more importantly, before you have a payment system, you have to have bank accounts. And when Modi insisted that everybody have a bank account, it changed the world. I remember when Vishakha and I worked together in setting up a life insurance company many years ago, we could not get birth certificate proof. We had no idea of identity identification. It was, ooh, we think this is Harry or this is, a myth. We didn't really know. This changes the world because all of a sudden you have specific identification, you have proof, you have track records. So these arteries that have been created through the use of technology have went right down to the smallest village. And what's that done? That has allowed Vishaka to buy 2 orange juice for 20 rupees, on the market in Mumbai. But it also has allowed somebody to get a 10 crore mortgage down the street, which was impossible before because it was all latchkey money that was involved, which was kind of an underground currency. That's all gone. So you've got the technology, and on top of that, you have the roads just as a physical. It was impossible to go from one end of Mumbai to the other. With the flypass now, the bridges that have been created, enormous progress has been made in kind of the arterial structure of moving goods, services, and people from point A to point B, whether it be the railway, whether it be light rail transit, whether it be automotive. And this is significant. Ports, and the improvement there. So all this infrastructure, and quite honestly, they're very much at the beginning phase of all this. But that base of putting the financial and the technological base in is allowing them to move fast on the other side. So it's not just, and what that does is that allows products and services to be delivered and innovation to take place. The days of people flying from China and India to North America to learn about our products are over. It's the other way now, all right? The innovation is happening in Asia far more directly than it's happening in many of the mature markets.
Just a comment on that last point. Going back 41 years when I first joined AIG, there was a perspective that the United States and the UK had this font of knowledge relative to insurance and distribution and the best techniques. And that was the case for quite a while, where we had expats traveling around the world setting up as GMs in different countries. But a transition occurred where the countries themselves started to speak for themselves, started to develop products on their own, indicated what works in a market, what doesn't work, and to the point now where we are really much more an industry of equals, if you will, when you consider the local nuance and the needs of the country itself. So excellent points, Gary. Vishaka.
Thank you, Gary, for reminding me of that. It's amazing how we take development for granted and keep looking for the next big milestone. But 2014 was when there was something called the JAM Trinity, which was launched by the Prime Minister. It was the Jan Dhan Yojana accounts, the Aadhaar, and the mobile. So every individual needed to get that Aadhaar card to identify the equivalent of a social security number, if you please. And then you had this whole Jan Dhan accounts, which was you had to go and open a bank account because any subsidy would be transferred to you only in bank accounts. And I think that one act of the JAM Yojana, the Jan Dhan Aadhaar Mobile, eliminated the entire middleman, eliminated wastage, ensured that the benefits reached the accounts of the beneficiaries with absolutely no dilution and no wastage. And that alone, I would say, has contributed significantly to the reduction of the number of people below poverty line. Because the kind of wastage that used to happen in the middleman in transfer of money, moving to direct transfer of money has changed the face of India and changed the demographics of the country. Today, India is one of the fastest growing countries where people are moving up from their purchasing power. I think we're the country which has got the maximum purchasing power. So in the question that you asked, Ralph, about, Indians going abroad, I think now it's about everyone else wanting to come to India because they see the domestic consumption here is so large that it can possibly compensate for a lot of the consumption that they are missing in their own developed countries.
Yeah, thank you, Vishaka. Gary, follow-up points?
Yeah, I just want to make one final point, and that over the years, people have said, what lesson have you, did you learn anything, on all the time you spent in India? Was there, what was kind of your significant lesson learned? And there was one big one, significance. And people say, significance? Yes. Well, I remember in the early 90s, I was running the sales force in Canada for Sun Life, and we were running X number of applications a month. By the time we got Fearless Sun Life up and running in a real manner in India, we were running 15 times the number of applications per month. 15 times. So the significance of the market, and it was actually Kumar Bir that taught me this, is that you have to appreciate the size of India and the opportunity. And at the beginning, it was hard to see it because there was not the mechanisms to take advantage of the significance. But today, because of the reforms and the changes, as Vishaka outlined, from the banking system to everything else, there is huge opportunity for companies now to harness these mechanisms to take advantage of the significance to have a real presence in India. So that's why, I'm such a big promoter of India, and certainly look forward to the continued growth and success of the country.
Gary, thank you for those comments. And we've reached the end of our time together. And in closing, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. And we've had a very informative discussion that leaves me with a better understanding of the sustainable growth in India and how important India has become to the global economy. And it's no longer just the promise of India. I think the promise of India is now. So with that, thank you again for joining us. I hope you're able to join us in Singapore at the Global Insurance Forum from November 5th to November 7th. Thanks again.